I'm Linda Hirsch.
I'm Jim Carney, and this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education.
What does it mean to grow up in the Bronx? With its reputation for poverty and grit, we might be surprised to know just how many well-known and accomplished people once called the Bronx home. Just Kids from the Bronx tells the compelling and riveting stories of a diverse group of Bronxites, including actor Al Pacino, architect Daniel Liebeskind, and J.Crew CEO Mickey Drexler. Today, author Arlene Alda joins me to discuss what it means to grow up in the Bronx and why so many of those interviewed express gratitude toward teachers and schools.
The book tells the stories of an earlier time of growing up in the Bronx. But what is it like to grow up in the Bronx today? I'll ask some Bronx teenagers about their experiences. But we begin with Linda and her guest in the studio.
My guest today is Arlene Alda, author of Just Kids from the Bronx, a book based on her interviews with 64 accomplished Bronxites. A native of the Bronx herself, Ms. Alda attended PS 76, Evander Childs High School, and graduated from Hunter College. She was a professional clarinetist, and she is an award-winning photographer and author. Just Kids from the Bronx is her 19th book. Thank you so much for joining us on EdCast today.
Thank you, Linda. Pleasure to be here.
Tell us a little bit about what prompted this book.
As a Bronxite, I've always kind of known that those were my roots, but it came to the surface when I went back to the building I grew up in with a newfound friend, Mickey Drexler, who's also the CEO of J.Crew. And when I found out that Mickey lived and had grown up in the same building as I did, we went back together to that building. It's called the Mayflower, in kind of northeast Bronx. Mickey and I were sharing stories, and in the course of his talking about his childhood, I was very moved by the knowledge that here I knew this man from his title, but I didn't know where it all started until he started telling me. And it was then that I really felt there were so many accomplished people from the Bronx that most of us don't know about. And I wanted to know more about where they started and what their experiences of them in the Bronx were.
I have to say that I found the book, I want to say this, so enjoyable to read. And the interviews, so many interviews with so many different people. And I realize now that you must have culled out of those interviews the best of what people had to tell you. What was it that stands out for you out of all the interviews that you conducted? What was it that you felt was a theme or something that really you really noticed?
It was very interesting. When I started, I had no idea because it was like a big jigsaw puzzle. I had a few of the corner pieces and a few of the middle pieces, but I didn't know what the total picture was. But in the course of talking with 64 different people, one basic theme seemed to emerge more than others outside of the hijinks that they did and the things that were terrible that happened to kids, you know, behind closed doors. Outside of that, the notion that mentors and teachers and schooling were prime in paving the way, in setting the tone, in noticing and in picking up on the unique qualities of the kids. That was key. Education was key. Teachers were key.
I noticed you have a quote from Al Pacino where he says, "It's the teachers. That's why when anyone says teacher, I light up." So can you remember some of there were some other people who really highlighted what their teachers meant to them?
A number of them. Well, Pacino himself was referring to the fact that it seems that after third grade, teachers started noticing that he was not behaving well for whatever reasons. And but one teacher took notice that this kid had real talent, and she took the trouble to go to his home, walk up the 5 flights of steps to talk to his grandmother, who was taking care of him while his mother worked, to tell her that he wasn't sure exactly what she told her, but it was about the fact that this kid had a lot going for him and that she had faith in him. You know, that kind of understanding of who the kid is by a teacher is critical. But you know, I'm reminded of a funnier story by Michael Brescia, Dr. Michael Brescia, who is head of Calvary Hospital right now and co-founder, and became an inventor of a very important kidney dialysis fistula, which is used today. But Michael, when he was a kid, defined himself or described himself as a street kid. And his father, who was a guy of the Depression, and where money was very tight and the family was, you know, living on a shoestring, Michael's father wanted Michael to become something like a plumber, because a plumber earns a steady living, you know. And he pointed to Nick down the street, who had a car and a house and a family. And somehow or other, Michael knew that being a plumber was not what he wanted, but his school grades did not reflect anything beyond just getting through. So he said when he graduated elementary school, which happened to be the same
76, right? Yeah,
PS 76, the teachers were glad to get rid of him. And he got to Evander Childs, and they gave them, I don't remember this, but he remembers clearly that he was given a standardized test, and it was an intelligence test. Or maybe it was not it was a standardized test where they would grade you and place you in the classes that you were supposed to be in. And his scores went through the roof. Well, the teacher didn't believe.
That's right, yes.
Yeah, she did not believe that this kid whose grades in school and whose reputation in school were not that, you know, his reputation was not great, the grades were not good. She thought he cheated. So she had him take it over. And again, his grades went through the roof. At which point she recognized the potential of the kid was not being realized. So she took him out of whatever class he was in, put him into her homeroom class where she could watch him, and also started to mentor him, so that he finally had the idea that, you know, maybe there's something else I could be doing. At about that time, a kid in his building got sick, and a doctor went on a house call, which they did in those days and no longer do, right? And came out, and all the neighbors were watching, because here was a guy in a very working class neighborhood who came in a big black car with a big black bag and a big bag, so, you know, and he was very distinguished looking. And Mickey as he's called, also looked around, and he saw everyone admiring that guy, and he said, that's what I want to be. And it wasn't that he wanted to help people, he wanted to be admired. He wanted to be admired. And the funny thing is, he didn't want to give up his street kid status. So although he began excelling in school, the kids, his old buddies, would line up in the cafeteria and prompt him to write their book reports. So he would, you know, ask questions like, so tell me what you think the book was about? And he'd write their book reports, and that kept him in good stead with his old buddies. So he had his cake and ate it too.
But that's a very interesting story, because yes, you mentioned the teacher that identified his talent via a standardized test, which, you know, those tests get a lot of criticism these days, but they can really point out something about a child that you don't notice. And then his own his own desires as a young person to be somebody or to do something.
Yeah.
Now, you also mentioned Michael Kay, who was a sports announcer, and he also had teachers who took a very personal role. What did they do for him?
Well, Michael Kay, who, as you said, is a New York Yankees play-by-play sports broadcaster, as a very young kid, loved baseball beyond description. And he also knew that he was not going to be a ball player himself. So early on, he would take his tape recorder and thrust it in front of his friends and make believe he was the announcer and he was talking to the man on the street. So he had that as his passion. And that the teachers in school recognized that. A couple of teachers that he mentioned recognized that. And there was a particular time they were in school. He was in the gifted program, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, so the kids who had certain intellectual gifts. I don't know what happened to the other kids who were not recognized as such, but there were some that were recognized. And he was in a special school, special class. The teachers brought in a television set on the day that there was a playoff with the Yankees, and, you know, I forget the exact details. But they knew that this kid loved this game so much. So there was this kind of sense that they were nurturing, and they also took him to ball games. I mean, they with parental permission.
I think he said he went to Cooperstown, and a question I want to ask you, can teachers have that much of a role today? Would we allow teachers to take such a personal interest?
This is
you know what I'm saying? You know,
such a tricky time we live in. I mean, there are some great teachers out there, and I'm sure more than a few, many devoted, knowledgeable, wonderful, caring teachers. But there are also some rogues. And how you separate one from the other, the laws have been in place now to protect the children. So I don't know.
It's hard, right?
Yeah, it's much, much harder. Like there's another person in the book, Luis Ubiñas, who grew up in the 80s or in the 90s. And here was a kid of a very poor family in the South Bronx at a time when the Bronx was burning, at a time when the schools in that section of the Bronx were in total disarray. He ended up in a classroom where he really did not belong there. He was also identified as being extremely bright. He scored very high on early test scores, and he could read at a very early age, do math. You know, he was a very bright kid. Well, the sad thing about that identification by the test is that a poor kid who doesn't have a steady home address doesn't get the notifications that to report to a particular school in the gifted program at a particular time. So because of that falling between the cracks, he ended up in the local, wherever he was, that local school. So by 4th grade, he himself was totally disillusioned. The teachers didn't know what to do with this bright kid, so they skipped him 2 grades. Here's a 9th grade little kid, a Puerto Rican little kid who skipped to the 6th grade, 2 grades. Now, in the 6th grade at that time, there were kids who were left back in the 6th grade. So there were 13 and 14-year-olds. With this 9-year-old, it was total chaos. A teacher knew the situation and took it upon himself without parental permission, actually, which would certainly not be allowed, but took it upon himself to bring the kid to 3 particular private schools in Manhattan, where he I was going to say audition because that's
No,
my field, where he interviewed for acceptance.
Same thing, it is an audition.
Acceptance into these schools. Got into all three, and the teacher then got in touch with the mother, and she was thrilled. And he asked the kid, the teacher asked the kid, which school would you like to go to? And what he described is kind of heartbreaking in a way. He described, he said he wanted to go to the school where the boys wore jackets and ties, and where if they ran in the hallway, there was a teacher to stop them. So you can imagine the chaos that was intruding on this kid's life. And that was the Allen Stevenson School. I remember that. And then he got scholarships to Cathedral High School, Harvard, and Harvard Business School. And the best part of that story is that he ended up being the head of the Ford Foundation, which gives out megabucks to worthy organizations and people. He said something very interesting. He said, people don't realize that when you're in a situation which he originally was in, which was dysfunctional, your horizon is very limited. When you get to a situation where the expectation and the possibility is there, he said that the horizon becomes limitless.
I remember.
Limitless. That was, it's chilling to hear that description of being walled in and having an open path, because this is still the country where possibility exists, even though it's getting harder and harder.
Now, Jim Carney had the opportunity to speak to some kids who are growing up in the Bronx today. So let's take a look and see what they say.
The community television network BronxNet produces an Emmy Award-nominated cable TV show with young people from the Bronx called Open 2.0. I paid them a visit in their BronxNet studios to see how things have changed for kids growing up in the Bronx. What's your first childhood memory that you can remember way back as a kid, as a little kid here in the Bronx?
I remember biking all throughout East Tremont. Though it's very bumpy, I remember constantly trying to ride a bike and needing my mom to hold me so I don't fall.
The same thing, I would ride my bike, but my mom would not let me leave the block, so I would just ride it back and forth, up the block, and there were people, the bus stop was right there, so every time somebody would get off the bus, and I would just be running into them with my bike. But I was a kid, so they just laughed it off, so. But now if I do that, they would get upset.
I mean, I remember when I was, young and I used to live in Boston, and, I used to, play in elementary school. We had a park. We used to play, Duck, Duck, Goose and all those little stuff, yeah. So it was pretty nice.
I used to always play around with the girls, and my first kiss was in kindergarten, so, I was kind of a ladies' man back then.
And has that changed?
No, it hasn't.
Okay, that's good to hear, okay. Do you think that your neighborhoods here in the Bronx, when you were growing up and you were little kids, were bad neighborhoods, or were they good neighborhoods to grow up in?
I think it depends on what part of the Bronx you're talking about, because I think no matter where you go, there's always a bad neighborhood. But as a Bronx as a whole, I don't think it's dangerous. I think it just depends on what part of the Bronx you're talking about, because there are parts of the Bronx that are dangerous, but then again, there are parts of the Bronx that are pretty good.
I would say the Bronx, there's a lot more people here. You grow up with a lot more social skills. You can deal with a lot more situations. And when I see other people, they don't really know everything that's not day-to-day life.
I think it depends on, the type of people who you, are around. So if my family were into that kind of stuff, then it would have definitely been dangerous. If, it was an Italian neighborhood I lived in. There wasn't, a lot of people of my, race. Yeah. So it was Italian, really Italian. And so I guess it was, I don't know, it was Little Italy over there. There's a whole bunch of pizza shops.
I was just going to say, it meant good pizza and good bread, right?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it possible to get a really good education here in the Bronx?
I mean, to have a good education, and it all pertains to you. How you see, if your parents train you to, be a good person, be successful, then, I mean, it's going to be an 80% chance that you are going to be successful because, you know, you have parents that, you know, that support you.
You can get a good education in the Bronx. I think it's what you do with what you have that matters.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
The first time that they asked me that question, I said, like, I wanted to be part of something that protects everybody. So I just thought about I want to be in the Air Force. I like planes and other stuff, but then now I'm opening my eyes and I'm just thinking about being like a paramedic. Anyways, I'm helping.
I'm not really fully sure yet, but something definitely with social service, like helping people and stuff like psychology or something like that. Because I really like think the human mind is like really interesting. I want to know what goes on in there because everybody's different. So it would be cool.
Do you think that coming from the Bronx has helped you or has worked against you in the professions that you're choosing to go into?
Okay, I don't think that the location where you come from depends on what you want to be. If you want to be something, you do, and that's it. The Bronx, I feel proud, like, from coming from the Bronx, because I can prove to the people that even if the Bronx is very dangerous for them, there's also many hopes, because not everybody is the same, you know. Like, the Bronx represents like one part of me, even if I wasn't born in the United States.
When you travel outside of New York and you visit relatives in different parts of the country, and you say, "I'm from the Bronx," what kind of reaction do you get?
I mean, yeah, because I remember I went to Texas, and like the way I talk, I be like, I say like yo a lot, so like they don't really understand me. So like, you know, like they talk kind of funny, so like sometimes I don't understand what they're saying.
Do they say, like, when you say you're from the Bronx, did they give you any kind of reaction?
I mean, like, I'm like the eyes like open a lot, so I'll be like, okay, but I'm not like a person that's bad in the Bronx, so I'm like a person that's really nice.
I have some relatives who live down in South Carolina, and I told them I live in the Bronx because they didn't know where I lived because I'm always moving. So they said, are you safe? Can you go outside? Are you safe at night? And I was like, everything's cool. So it's just that they have like a different type of perspective because they live outside of the Bronx. Once you're in the Bronx and you, like, once you're here, you're home.
Reporting from the BronxNet studios, I'm Jim Carney. Now back to Linda and Arlene Alda in the studio.
What did you think when you heard these young people talk about growing up in the Bronx today?
I loved it. I loved it. They have an insider's view that is so, there's a purity to that and a love in that. It's beautiful. And also it gives, I think the message is not only is it home and it's safe and it's a wonderful place, but that you can thrive here. And that's what most of the people in Just Kids from the Bronx came away with, that this was the launching pad, that it gave you the place from which to start your life, as an adult. I thought that was a very hopeful and lovely, lovely piece. It also does point out the perception, and I think it's an incorrect perception from the outside world, because I think when the Bronx was burning, that image from the 80s,
in that movie,
70s, 80s, Fort Apache type thing, it happened, but it happened in that time period, and it happened in a specific part of the Bronx. That is no longer the Bronx. The Bronx is poor, and the Bronx is struggling, but the Bronx is moving, and I think it's moving in the right direction.
You mentioned again, I know in the stories that you told us today, about these students who found being mixed in with other people, getting out of their little community really was brought, and you used the phrase opening the horizons for them. A lot of the people that you interviewed also went to specialized high schools.
Yes.
A number of them went to Bronx High School of Science, they went to Music and Art, they went to Industrial Arts. Do you think that played a pivotal role for them in some way?
I'm sure for whoever went to those schools, it was very pivotal. I mean, Robert Levine, Bob Levine, entertainment lawyer, who described himself as always being on a fast track. You know, he was a bright kid. When he went to the Bronx High School of Science, it opened up a whole horizon for him. Mickey Drexler, who my dear friend, who I never knew growing up in the same building. You're right.
Only in New York, by the way, right?
Well, we're the age difference,
right, right.
Huge building, whatever. But Mickey, when he went to the Bronx High School of Science, it was an epiphany for him because, unlike a lot of other immigrant households, and especially at that time, the Jewish households were, you know, get a good education and you'll become a doctor or a lawyer. That was that was the thing. He never heard that. He never got any encouragement from his family. So when he went to high school, and everyone was expected to go to college from Bronx High School of Science, it opened up a whole other way of thinking for him. These schools are so critical, but it's not just in the specialized schools. I went to one of the biggest high schools, public high schools at the time, which was Evander Childs High School. It had 5,000 kids in it. Now, there were a number of schools that had 5,000 kids, 3,000, 4,000. You know, that was the norm then. And I don't know how any of the teachers managed or how, whatever, but we took it for granted. In that school at the time that I went, and this was from 1946 to 1950, there were sensational teachers there. One of whom in particular became a mentor and a dear friend, and kind of paved a life path for me that I didn't see before he came on the scene, and that was in music. And he recognized this young kid, me, eager beaver, and made sure that I had good private instruction from someone he happened to know on the clarinet, and introduced me to the notion of chamber music and the various concerts that were going on in Manhattan at the time. So, I mean, there are wonderful teachers out there. So I would say that the schooling is critical. Even Melvin Glover, Grandmaster Melly Mel, great rap singer, innovator, talked about how he had specific language, which was great, that he knew he couldn't educate himself out of the Bronx and into a field because he blew that with bad grades, even though he was smart. He said, but he knew that there was a way for him, and it was, again, his particular talent. But everyone knows that education is the way to level the playing field, and it's such a critical part of what we as a country owe the children.
Your book just does a wonderful job describing the stories. I'm so sorry we're out of time because I could listen to these stories endlessly. So I want to thank you so much, Arlene Alda, Just Kids from the Bronx. You tell the most compelling stories, and you must be a terrific interviewer because you got so much out of your guests. It's a marvelous book that tells so many wonderful stories, and I really appreciate your coming here today to speak with us about them.
Thank you very much, Linda. Great to be here.
That's it for this edition of EdCast. Until next time, class dismissed.